Welcome, welcome, welcome to the My Empty Hands podcast, where we are just conversing about Kempo and the martial arts and whatever else happens to come our way. I'm going to be talking today with Rich Howell, and we're just going to go over our journeys and talk about all the good things that come along. So just to kind of start off, I'll just kind of give my brief little history. I started training in Kempo in the early mid 90s. It was essentially a Tracy's school, but we didn't call it that. But the curriculum was that 40 techniques per belt, which seems insanity compared to where I'm training now. I'm training in a Ed Parker American Kempo school now, and we're on the 16 technique curriculum. At my original school, I got about halfway through my green belt on the way to third brown when I left for the Army. Dabbled a little bit in Taekwondo, a little bit in Hapkido, and did a little bit of boxing. Didn't actually, get into any fights. Just did the training for that. Other than that, I also got involved in capoeira, and I've been doing that for coming on 17 years now. And then just getting back to the Kempo, I recently got my green belt, so just working my way on up to that black belt and beyond, and we'll just hopefully I won't pass out with all this other things that I got going on. I've also been looking into getting back into Hapkido, doing some Kali and Filipino martial arts, and pretty much kind of whatever else I can get my hands on. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So Mr. Rich Howell, if you could go ahead and maybe tell us how you got involved in Kempo. Where did it all start for you? And just kind of take it away.
Yeah. Yes, sir. All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Reggie, for having me on. I think it's great what you're doing. So, and also congratulations on your newly minted green belt status. Slightly intentional pun, I guess. But yeah, green belt's a very fun portion of the journey. So yeah, enjoy it, man. As far as me, I started, you had mentioned Taekwondo. I actually started as a kid in Taekwondo. It wasn't my favorite. And in fact, it was my, I was a green belt going for my green stripe as they do in that system, as seems pretty typical in that venue. I didn't know what the requirements were. My instructors said, okay, you're ready to test. I went to my test. They asked me to do a form that nobody had ever taught me. Maybe they showed me the beginning of it once. And so I said, I'm sorry, but I don't know that form. And then they said, well, I'm sorry, but you failed. I said, well, it's hard to hear that as a kid, especially when you were told otherwise, right? So fast forward to when I joined Kempo, we had just like most Kempo schools have is a requirement for each belt. It's spelled out in black and white. This is what we expect of you. And I said, I can work with that, right? So it wasn't until many years later, but and in fact, the place, it was a West Coast Taekwondo school that I had originally joined. And then it just so happened that the Kempo school was now in that same location that the Taekwondo school used to be in. So it was kind of familiar surroundings, but it just seemed like it was sort of meant to be. So that was kind of my beginnings. I started off going to, your kind of typical free 3 introductory lesson type of a program with a guy who was at the time my mom's boyfriend. And he, it was one of those things, we're going to do something with the kid for bonding time or whatever. Mm-hmm. But he didn't really take to it.
Was there like a time gap between going from the Taekwondo school to the Kempo school, or?
Absolutely. I had done Taekwondo when I was about in third grade. Third grade, so I
Mm.
don't know, maybe 10 years, 9 years old. I'm a little fuzzy. I'm not that young anymore, so everything bleeds together a little. But yeah, there had been a significant time gap. I was soured by my Taekwondo experience, so it wasn't until I know you're inspired a lot by movies to train. So it wasn't until several years later when I watched forget exactly the title, but it was a Van Damme movie, and
Okay.
I just saw him, kicking butt, and I was like, I think I want to get back into the martial arts. And at the time, I didn't really know who to talk to about it, but luckily, my mom's neighbor was a police officer, and he was also an instructor at the Kempo school. So that also worked out. It was kind of like a confluence of events
Hmm.
led me
Yeah.
led me to the Kempo school that I found. And so that's kind of how I got started. The intro lessons, I think, were in '92. I
Okay.
I didn't decide, and those were kind of go through the intro lessons, and then due to the other person not really being interested in doing it, there was kind of a dead spot after that. And then I think sometime in '93, I just said, well, I'm going to go back and I want to do it. So I joined. I was 13 years old. So I was too old to be in the junior program,
Mm.
and a little young to be training with the adults. But you get in there, you get your butt kicked for however long, and that's a great catalyst for learning, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Repeat Repeated failure is
Mhm.
just more
Yeah,
preparation.
to feel is to believe. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, one of my instructors ended up becoming my stepdad. So
No
uh,
pressure.
yeah, no pressure, but that was great. He was really good. He actually asked me if he could take my mom to coffee before he ever asked her. So
Nice, nice.
yeah, that's a good thing, and he's a great guy, and he taught me some of the Kempo that I know. So it's
Mhm.
great.
Now, was this like a American Kempo or Tracy or some other version of?
Yeah, getting into specificities, this was at one time, and the school had been around with many locations since I think the late '60s. It was a school called Karate Ways. It initially was a Tracy school, a Tracy system, and somewhere in there, the original, my first sensei, Joe Meyer, his sensei, and I know a lot of people in Kempo get turned off by the use of Japanese terms or whatever, but
Hmm.
it's just what we knew. Uh, the original sensei was a guy named Dan Bixler, and he was running a school up in San Mateo, California. And we don't know what happened, but he kind of fell off the radar. My first sensei, Joe Meyer, he had to go up there and kind of take care of everything. Left my current instructor, Dale Gobin, to handle some of the things down in the other locations. So there were several locations. It was kind of a big deal. They put on the national what was it, the Karate Ways Invitational. They had tournaments that they sponsored every year. So uh, kind of a big deal out here in this area, Bay Area of California, and it was a big thing. But by the time I had joined, it had pared down to, I think, three locations. There was a Almaden area of San Jose. There was a school up in Pleasant Hill, California, and the one in Morgan Hill, California, where I was from. So just lucky that it was there. All the other locations previously had been up in San Jose. So for
Oh,
whatever
wow.
reason, there was one down in Morgan Hill, and that's the one that I found me. And so to get back to the question, sorry to get off on a tangent, but
No, it's
it
fine.
it, it was originally a Tracy system. Dan Bixler was nowhere to be found. I still don't. I haven't found out what happened with that. But our sensei Joe Meyer, he was looking to have a path forward for himself and for the school. Black belt promotional wise, and he ended up hooking up with Master Huck Planis,
Oh, very nice.
who is a great guy. I've gotten to meet him at least once out in Maui, which was fun too.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Very nice.
but so that was once they got with Huck, and I say they because it was well before my time. Huck started helping them kind of initialize a transition into like a more parkerized type of a system. That transition was never really fully realized, but the logic behind the techniques, the approach, was introduced there. So my current instructor, Sensei Dale Gobin, he took well to the teachings of Huck, and a little more than Sensei Meyer did. But at the same time, it was Sensei Meyer's school, so Mr. Gobin didn't have full leeway to implement everything that he wanted to implement. And so until many years later, when Joe Meyer had moved out to Florida and the reins were handed over, so to speak, and they gradually started doing more and more parkerization of a Tracy system. So we still had the Tracy technique names, but I'm sure from your experience you might be able to corroborate, but some of the earlier Tracy stuff seemed to be more over a right-handed system. One hand, you were just, that right hand was working real hard and that left hand was kind of up near your chest, maybe as some semblance of a cover, right? So it really started trying to incorporate a more ambidextrous type of a situation, which was good for me because I'm left-handed. So
okay.
left-handed guy in a moreover right-handed martial art was an interesting thing to experience, but I think it helped me a lot.
Yeah, you'd
Also,
get along great with my current instructor. He's left-handed, and he he makes us do everything on both sides. So you see lots of smoke coming from ears when it's like, okay, let's do it on the second side. And his thing is, he had to learn everything on his weak side, so we all have to do it too. So, but it's good. It definitely makes you think and makes you work. And you get out there on the street and you can't tell your attacker, hey, this is my weak side, don't attack me there, attack me this way. So
yeah.
it's definitely good to work both sides. I'm so definitely curious. It's curious to me on hearing about schools that transition from the when I started at my current school. I actually didn't really know that there was a difference between that there was different kind of versions of Kempo, and specifically the Tracy's and at Parker. So when I started, I was a little bummed that I had to start over as a white belt, but I've gotten over that as I've learned so much more now than I did previously. But yeah, it was quite a shock. I mean, my first school, we did 40 techniques per belt. Now I'm doing 16. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's the Tracy version is very, very right hand centric. I discovered that once I came, the Tracy techniques for the most part are different or kind of more spread out than they are in the Ed Parker version. But I definitely noticed the difference when I got to what I like to call the Kempo All Star techniques, the ones that you find in both systems or just about every system. So your five swords, your thundering hammers, flashing wings, sleeper. Those ones that they're everywhere. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, once I got to five swords, I was I'd be in class and it's like, okay, like we're going to give you a new technique. And when it was one that didn't match what I had learned before, I was like, okay, well, I'm learning a technique. But then they're like, okay, you're going to learn five swords now. And it's like, oh yeah, I already know five swords. And the Ed Parker way is vastly different than the Tracy way. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So as I've been going along, I've been kind of trying to figure out, trying to, I don't know, maybe kind of play favorites as like, oh, well, I like the Tracy way better. I like the Ed Parker way better. And it kind of varies from time to time, but
Yeah.
definitely having, working the both sides and kind of working the different variations is uh, uh, beneficial to the training, and you're not just kind of memorizing, you're actually having to think and use your brain when you use these.
Yeah, and some of that comes, I'm not. My attempt is not to disparage anyone, but some of the guys who just started it in and have continued with in the Parker system. It's a fabulous system. I have nothing against it whatsoever. It's great, but there's this, and several of them have spoken on it. There's this ingraining of like, these are the techniques. This is how you do them. If it's not that, then it's wrong. And some are more open-minded than others. But you know what? I came up through like I said, a more over Tracy system. I started teaching early on. We had like a red belt program, which
Mm-hmm.
was an instructor program for people who were below the rank of brown belt. Usually that gets, well, it's not very usual or typical, but that happens at purple belt and above. I was able to get my red belt after we took a instructor's course, and then basically went over how to teach the the intro lessons, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like a junior instructor program. But I did that. We had to take a class. There was a written test and an oral test. There were several of us in that class. I was the only one that passed the test. Well, no, actually, I got below the required score to pass, but I also set the curve. So everybody else got a lower score. So I got my red belt as an orange belt near the end of my orange belt, and then a few other people in the class got theirs after they got their purple. But teaching, if you ever have an opportunity to teach, and this is for everybody in Kempo, if you have the opportunity to teach, even at the most basic level, it is hands down the greatest accelerator to learning.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you can't, as a student, in your head, you're like, okay, I got to do this technique. It's I kind of do this, and then I have to step kind of somewhere over here and do this and hit him about, in the head somewhere. Well, when you're teaching, there is no there is no, you sort of do this. You have to know exactly and be able to communicate exactly what the other person needs to learn. So, it's a huge opportunity for somebody to become an even better student by teaching. So I started teaching early, started going up through the ranks. I finally got my black belt in 1999, so it's been a while.
Very nice.
Yeah, and then in 2000, things were what they were. Student turnout was low, and the school closed. Newly minted black belt, pretty much orphaned. We did some training with Mr. Gobin in his garage for a little while after that, but that had its own logistical issues and stuff, and he was a busy guy himself, so kind of fell off. Somewhere around 2003 or so, I relocated up to the Roseville and Granite Bay area of California. It's up near Sacramento.
Yeah, I'm
And
familiar with that area.
yeah, and I found a Kempo school up there, and didn't really have much money at the time, but I called the guy up, and it was a man named Paul Frampton. Called him up and spoke with him over the phone, and he invited me to come check out a class, and I showed up. I don't think I had maybe I did have my gi with me, but I showed up, and it was an exercise class, and it had been, like I said, a couple of years since I have trained. Man, I was just watching the class, and I was like, oh God, I miss being out on the mats. You and I had talked a little bit about this before. And man, he had me come out on the mat, had me throw a few more advanced kicks, like the spinning crescent kick, jump spinning crescent, and so he's like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, and then asked me if I knew how to teach, and of course I did. I've done a lot of teaching, so he ended up letting me train there and having me teach, instead of charging me tuition. So that helped me out a lot.
Very nice.
But I got to learn yet another system, which ended up being another Tracy system, but different from what I had learned. Of course, some commonalities, all the way from white up to second degree black. And so that was my first view of there is no one way to do a technique. There is no right way, wrong way, all that, right? And then fast forward to just after the pandemic, myself and Mr. Gobin were actually able to start training together again. And we started a process of going back through the old system, refining the old Karate Way system, refining things, throwing out the techniques that were just, because let's be real, not all techniques are great techniques.
Exactly.
Some techniques aren't great, but they do teach you valuable lessons. So that's the rubric through which you have to pass some things. But it really gave me an opportunity to take what I knew previously, then a more Parkerized version of what I knew previously, then somebody else's Tracy system, and I had also taught myself some of the Parker system as well. Mr. Gobin knows several systems of Kempo as well. So we kind of teamed up, cut some of the fat, and we turned it into a system that we're pretty happy with. And it's not entirely Parker. We kept some of the Tracy things. I don't know if you had this, but a lot of Tracy techniques have an A, a B, a C, sometimes a D version, and I look at that as an advantage, right? I view it as a foray into the what if phase early on. A lot of people talk about the three phases, the ideal phase, the what if phase, and then the spontaneous phase. I like the fact that we kept a little bit of the what if phase baked in as people first start and then progress as well, because it gets the ideas flowing there, right? So and that's been a great journey. I'm still kind of teaching my way through it, and of course I find things that still need rearranging and stuff, but not everybody learns the same way, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person, and that's part of the greatness of Kempo too.
Yeah, no, I like being able to have this space where it's encouraged to experiment with and try out all these different what ifs, and see what tailor it to what works for you, and what works for me isn't gonna be the same that works for you. And I like that exploration and getting to play with it. So kind of with my journey, one of the things that I've noticed with the school that I'm training at now versus my previous training was uh, do a lot more working the techniques on a person, on a body,
Oh yeah.
versus the quote unquote air karate that I did a lot of at my original school. I mean, we worked techniques on each other also, but not nearly as much as I do now. And I'm just really realizing, like, hey, these things, when you're doing something in the air versus doing it on a person, you get a very different reaction, and things don't always go exactly the way that you planned. Um, and just kind of in my, I don't know, completionist type mind, my original plan was to quote unquote finish my training at of my original school and get to my black belt. And so I had been working on my techniques and stuff. I have my old training manual, and I got videos of all the techniques and whatnot that my original instructor taught. So I've been kind of going through those. And my plan was, oh, well, I'm going to kind of refresh everything and get it all back to fighting shape, and then, go back and test with my original instructor. I've since changed that notion now that I'm, getting up in my system now, and it's like, yeah, there's a lot more things that I have to learn. So my original school, we didn't do freestyle, we didn't do terminology and sayings and pledges, and that is proving to be kind of difficult for me for whatever reason. Terminology and things like that don't stick in my mind that well. I mean, I of course could be training them more. So I'm not gonna put putting the blame solely on me, but there's a lot more mental in my training now, and so as I'm getting more and more, it's I can't spend as much time working on the old material as I used to or would like. So my plan has now changed, and I'm going to keep my focus on my current training, and once I get to that coveted black belt, then I will start. I want to kind of go back and sort of battle test my old stuff, and spend some time working the techniques on bodies and working those different scenarios, those different what ifs, and seeing, okay, well, this piece I like, or this piece I don't like. My original instructor, he does not teach 40 techniques per belt anymore. He halved all of those. After you get to black belt, he gives you the option, if you want to go back and kind of learn all the techniques that he took out, then you can do that. So I would certainly like to get all of that kind of in my brain, and just one, for me, and then two, kind of to say, like, okay, well, I kind of sort of preserve that part of the lineage. I certainly don't want to get into Kempo politics and drama, but there is that battle of, oh, well, this traditional, we got to keep these things exactly the way they were taught, and then there's the camp of, oh, well, this art was supposed to evolve, it was supposed to change, and so we could go back and forth on that. We're not going to do that, but we could
Right.
certainly get into that all day long. But I like having both sides. I'm really thankful that I've had had a chance to experience both sides, and get what I need from both angles and both perspectives. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, and who's right and who's wrong is an endless rabbit hole down which you can travel.
exactly.
And you'll find as many people as you ask, you'll probably find just as many opinions on the matter. So it's really what works for you. There is no right and wrong. And we've actually, tried to straddle that divide ourselves with Karate Ways, right? We have our old way of doing things, but we're not naive enough to blindly believe that that's the way it should be done. That's why we took the Parker stuff in there. We're trying to preserve the historical aspects of Kempo via the forms, right? And I know, and that's another rabbit hole. Are forms useful? Are forms not? But we like them. I didn't like them as I was coming up through the ranks. To me, it was just some other stuff I had to memorize. But, getting to that black belt level and then wanting to know more, there's so much stuff hidden in those if you just care to notice, or and a lot of things I have taught myself while teaching someone else. Something will just jump out of my mouth, and in the back of my mind I'm like, did I really just say that? I don't know if I ever actually knew that, but I just taught myself something new. So the beginning part of that, Parkerization of our first system with Mr. Planis was started with the forms. And so all the techniques in the forms have a way that they're done in the forms, and then they have a way that they're done as standalone techniques. So again, that just, of course, it makes for more material, but more material isn't necessarily the end goal, right? It's more situations from which you can learn. So, and there are systems that we kept in, or techniques that we kept in our system because they're in the form, right? So
exactly,
you don't want to be teaching somebody a form and you're like, okay, well, the next technique in this form is this technique that we never taught you. Right? It's fine to have a different form version of the technique versus an actual application version, because again, you've got things that you can learn from them separately.
Yeah, that's something that I always it's kind of funny to me in both systems is that as techniques get shuffled around in between the belts, you sometimes run into situations where you're supposed to learn a particular concept or something, and it's like, oh well, this concept comes up in this technique, but you don't learn that technique for a few more belts, or you're doing a form and it's like, oh yeah, it's got this technique. It's like, but this green belt form has techniques that you don't learn until you get to brown belt. So it's like, I guess that happens. It's hard to keep everything,
that all
perfect alignment.
Yeah, it goes back to how genius Master Parker was when he, he had several versions of Kempo. And, it's been said that he even taught the same technique to different people in different ways to see what they would come up with or what they would do with it. And then, decide or just let it ride. So that just reinforces the fact that there is no one right way. And it also goes to back to something you were saying about, finishing your training. You're never finished. You're never finished. And that's what's so fun. I mean, I started when I was, like I said, 13 years old. I'll be 46 this year. And I've loved Kempo pretty much my whole life. And it still intrigues me. It still fascinates me. I can't do all the stuff I used to be able to do, of course, but, there's just so much learning that can be had. And, it's often said that once you get to black belt, when you're coming up through the ranks, black belt is just that is the pinnacle. That's my goal. Right. And that's, it's definitely a great goal to have. But it's often said that once you get to black belt, that's where you really start learning.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to come up through the ranks, I was always like, well, man, that's kind of a letdown, right? You're like, that's a whole lot of work just to start, but it really is true. And the, stuff you learned coming up through the ranks after your black belt, you constantly are learning more and more things about what you already know. And again, it makes it moreover a lifelong study. And I've enjoyed all of it. Painful.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, but it's a good pain. It's a good pain.
Absolutely.
So, you get to be a dummy for a technique, and you get that nice shot in the arm or in the leg or something, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this stuff does work. So
Yeah. What we receive too easily, we esteem too lightly. No, that's part of the value of it too. I honestly think that more young people today would gain a lot by, having something such as Kempo that is moreover a meritocracy, right? There are no participation trophies. It is, you work, you learn, you perform what you've learned, and you advance based upon that actual realization of, yeah, it's I would love, personally, I would love to see American Kempo in whatever form, become the national martial art of the United States. I think it would be great if it were taught in schools at some level,
yeah,
just like just like certain martial arts are over in Japan, in China, and in Korea, and there are martial arts taught in non-Asian countries as well.
yeah,
So
yeah. I
it's
would
good for
definitely like to see more more people get involved in the martial arts and be exposed to it, just for so many reasons. Of course, there's the self-defense aspect, but then there's the community, there's the respect, there's just so many other pieces that you get from the training that I feel is we're getting away from in a lot of aspects. And I mean, yeah, we get the technology. I'm the last person to downplay technology, because I am in technology all day long, every
well,
day,
and here we
all
are,
night.
right?
And, yeah, um, but there's definitely a social aspect that we just don't really know how to connect with each other anymore,
Yeah,
at least the way that I see it. And having something where we're getting together and working towards a common goal, I think would help mend those kind of the dying art of being social.
yeah. I mean, technology should be an augment to life, not a replacement for it.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's kind of the way we've been going. Hopefully, the pendulum swings back the other way, and personal responsibility, hard work, ethics, instant karma, all those things are taught on the mat. And I think we'd have a lot less issues in schools and just in society in general if more people were exposed to that kind of an experience. But
Gotcha.
yeah,
Uh, got a little dog action in the back there, so sorry about that.
it happens.
Um, just kind of change gears a little bit.
Yeah.
So is there? Do you have maybe a story? And of course, you don't have to share, but just kind of fun little story. I'll go ahead and throw one out here that I've experienced just recently. So
Okay.
during my green belt test, I started making my way through coordination set 2, and was feeling pretty good. Got about halfway, and then I came to the realization that I was asked to do blocking set 2 instead of coordination set 2. So yeah, that was quite a facepalm moment for me. Luckily I did well enough on everything else. Well, most everything else. There was that test was pretty brutal. It was about 5 hours, and I had a few memory lapses on a number of things. So
Yeah.
it was kind of touch and go there for a moment, but yeah, I
Yeah.
was happy to get through that. But yeah, do you have any kind of silly stories?
Well, there's always plenty of fun things that happen on the mat, but the Kempo, belt tests in our school were always very hands-on, very rigorous. Well, they're designed to wear you out and then make you think. At least that's how it was for us. And they wanted to push you to the very edge of your physical limit and then say, now we're going to attack you.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose isn't necessarily to expect you to do everything right or to see how many times you fail. It's there to see how you get back up and how you push, and that's a huge value too. I mean, I remember, I had a training partner that I came up through the ranks with, a guy named Mike Miller. And, like I said, I started as a teenager. Mike was in his very early 20s. But, I mean, I was this scrawny little 13, 14-year-old guy, you know. And Mike was like, always played soccer his whole life. He was really into soccer, and he was like 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there, like 220 pounds. I was maybe 140, 150.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the guy that I had to do all my techniques on, right? So here I was, this scrawny kid, and I mean, if he needed to make a technique work, he could just, he had so
Yeah.
much more mass on me and so much more muscle, and he could just throw me to the ground if that's what he had to do. But me, if I didn't learn the exact right balance, right, if I didn't learn the technique, the very technical aspect of things, there was no way I was taking that guy down. So that forced me into stuff. But it was during our blue belt test. We took all of our tests together, except for up near the middle of brown, I think second brown, or maybe even up to first brown. I was kind of getting some. I was not always in school. I was not a big fan of homework, so so I let some grades slip, and my mom said, "That's it. I'm taking you out of Kempo until you get your grades back up." And Mike was able to pass me. But back when we were coming up through the ranks, blue belt, we had, there were a lot of club techniques and overhead club. I do have a VHS tape of this somewhere, but the somewhere is up to lots of debate and much searching and probably not finding. But man, he overhead club attack. He goes up for that cross block,
Mm-hmm.
and the Uke's wrist wrapped around, and you can hear the
Mm.
man's skull resonate.
Ouch.
Yeah, but again, if in a belt test, if you get hit, it's nobody's fault but yours. You either blocked incorrectly or you stepped incorrectly out of the path
Mm-hmm.
of the weapon. And so, yeah, I remember watching that tape a few times and just rewinding to hear Mike Miller's the resonant frequency of Mike Miller's skull.
Mm.
Pretty brutal. He came out of it okay. He was fine. That was certainly a pretty entertaining, or I guess as entertained as you can be when you're on the verge of nausea,
Yeah.
nausea and
Yeah, for sure.
exhaustion. But
Exactly.
and then maybe another story was kind of recently. This was just before the pandemic. I was teaching a class every Wednesday. It was a small class, and one of my guys was finally ready to test for his yellow belt. So new guy ready to test for his yellow belt, and it was just he and I. And I had the mat set up, in the building where we would train in the basement of a local building that allowed us to use it. And I had the mat set up down there, and we were just about to bow in, and I say, oh my gosh, I almost forgot. And he's looking at me like I'm crazy, and I run out of the room, and I go find a garbage can, drag it in, and I place it at the back corner of the mat, and he's looking at me like, what is going on here? And I said, that's just in case you pop. And he kind of laughed it off, and he was like, ha ha ha, okay, funny joke. You're razzing me a little. And he figured it out. There was a couple times where he ran to that can. Didn't do the deed, but he understood that I wasn't joking after that. And, he was, of course, just tired as all heck when we were done. And it was great because I was able to look at him and say, if anybody ever tries to tell you that you did not deserve your rank, without a doubt that they're full of it. So that was a good experience for him. And, I was proud. It was one of my first belt promotions for somebody else after I had started that class. And so it was a good time. He moved on to Oregon and still wants to learn Kempo. So hopefully I did something right there.
Excellent. All right. So as we kind of head towards the close there, I've got a few little questions there to throw at you. First one being, do you have a favorite technique, or 3 or 4 favorite techniques if you can pick just one?
Let's see here. I mean, of course, everybody loves 5 swords, and it's such a great building block, and just great to build off of. But one of my absolute favorites, I think, is flashing wings.
Yes.
And that's common between our version, all of our versions of Tracy's system and the Parker system. I just like how you get in there, and moreover, what happens below the waist more than what you're doing with your arms. It really is kind of an introduction, and there certainly are other techniques that you really start manipulating the base of your opponent, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people earlier on get caught up with, I need to hit him here, and I need to hit him here, and it's got to be this hand formation and this strike to affect whatever else it is. But that the lessons you learn, and it really the theme of brown belt to me, brown belt and above, but specifically all the brown belt techniques, is that lower body manipulation that's nobody really pays attention to. Mm-hmm. And it's actually one of the reasons why we beat on stances. Is something that I would refuse to compromise on. It informs the learning process, even at the beginning, right? Just like building and building, if the foundation is crap, the rest of the building doesn't stand much of a chance. So flashing wings, just that lower body manipulation stuff, and it's a heck of a technique anyway.
Yeah, it's a great one. I'm a big fan of that, and I guess I'll just bring it up since I keep my track record going. So somehow this has come up in every episode I've recorded so far. But so dating myself, big fan of the Panther production videos back in the days, and there was one with David German. And he was blending Kempos, like the Kempo Jiu-Jitsu connection, and he was integrating Jiu-Jitsu into the Kempo techniques. And one of the ones that really stuck out with me was flashing wings. He added in some wrist locks and some arm bars to flashing wing, and I just thought, man, this is so cool. Kempo is such a good base for connecting with other pieces and other arts, and so I was always a big fan of that. So
yeah, I mean, it really is. The more you study Kempo, the more you'll find that it's pretty I mean, you'll find lots of wrist locks in there, particularly on some of the upper level knife attack techniques, some of the disarming stuff. And a guy doesn't have to have a knife in his hand for you to employ a wrist lock. There's much made about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I heard you and Jamie Seabrook talking about that at length. I think there's plenty of traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu to be found within Kempo. And I hear a lot of people talking about cross training, and I want to take this, and I want to incorporate this. And I think that, in my personal opinion, it's all in there anyway. It's just whether or not you're seeing it, or whether or not you're incorporating it. Honestly, aside from taking Taekwondo, Kempo's the only martial art I've felt I've really ever needed. My opinion there diverges from several. In the Kempo community, everybody regards a lack of groundwork as some Achilles heel. But I mean, I don't know if you've seen Jesse Encamp's foray into jiu-jitsu tournaments, but control and distancing, in my opinion, and of course mistakes happen, and you can find yourself on the ground. You have to be realistic about things, right?
Yeah.
But moreover, if you're up against a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, you kind of have to want to play that game with them for it to be applicable. That being said, I have great respect for Master Speakman and what he's done with 5.0. If there were any other kind of Kempo that I would want to study, it would probably be that. I mean, I'd be intrigued. But the great thing about Kempo is, once you know how to move, it's all just additions, subtractions, anyway. Exactly. And nice. Hands and feet still work in a horizontal position. The trick is not getting there in the first place. I mean, it's great to train for possibilities, or maybe even inevitabilities, but to make it your focus, I don't know.
Gotcha.
But the thing about BJJ and MMA in general is that BJJ works really great, and the thing is, on the street, you're not guaranteed a single opponent. You're not guaranteed a well-prepped fighting surface. You're not guaranteed a referee. You're not guaranteed adequate lighting. You're not guaranteed someone who will ascribe to some semblance of rules, right? So while it's really great, it has dominated MMA, I think if your first instinct is to lay on the ground and invite someone else to do so as well, probably not the best strategy. However, absolutely useful tool if you're gonna get into situations of that sort. And I realize I'm probably a minority in that opinion, but that's fine. It's mine. I'll stick with it.
That's fine. We all have our paths and have what we like and what we don't like, and that's what makes the world go around there. So do you have a favorite form and or set?
Lordy. I have a least favorite form or set.
I'll take that as well.
And I know you're not going to like this, but we all have opinions. Book set is my least favorite.
Oh, part of my heart.
I know. I'm not trying to do you like that, Reggie, but to be clear, I did keep it in the Karate Way system. It was, part of our older requirements. It was somewhere, I believe, in the brown belts, but I just found it to be a teacher of bad habits. And so I did keep it, but I moved it up, or we I should say, moved it up in past, I believe, first black into,
Oh, okay.
I believe it's in second black, more as like, okay, Kempo, here's a somewhat historical form. It breaks some rules, but it's not going to teach you bad habits, right? Because we're done forming your basics, right? By first
Gotcha.
degree black. So it's knowledge. There's no such thing as bad knowledge. There's no such thing as learning something that is disadvantageous, of course, right? So we kept it. Mr. Gobin is a fan of it, so
Mm-hmm.
that was also part of that decision too. But
Okay.
absolutely my least favorite. I would have to say though, my favorite is probably Form 4. Probably Form 4.
So
And it's and
I like it.
that's probably majority opinion
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I hold.
Yeah, I think Form 4 and Short 3 are probably going to be the ones I hear the most. But
Short
yeah,
3 is an
no, I
interesting
like
one.
it.
Yeah,
I
it's
like
the
it.
only
I like it.
one-sided technique form.
I
So it's
like it.
got its individuality there.
I like it. All right, and so our last question there: if there is anyone that you could train with, living or dead, fictional or non-fictional,
Oh, wow.
who would that be?
That's a very broad question, sir. Um, but being a Kempo guy for, at this point, a majority of my life, I would be remiss if my first pick was not Grandmaster Parker. I mean, why not? He's the guy who conceptualized and formed this art. So that would have to be my number one pick. I'll add that I have had the pleasure of training with a few, very very talented upper rank black belts. Huck Blanis being one of them, Graham Lelliott being another. I've got friends, a good friend named Harry Troop out in Maui, and I try whenever I go on vacation there, I try to meet up with him. But let's see, aside from Huck Planis, and of course my current instructor Dale Gobin, the guy is amazing, and love that guy like a brother. I would have to say though, this is a living one, a real living person. I would have to say Doc Chappelle, Ron Chappelle. I've always been man. Whenever on that the past, present, and future Kempo group, I always enjoy reading what he has to say, and he's just a wealth of information, and actually, I guess at this point, kind of a historical bridge between Grandmaster Parker and today. So, yeah, and he's always been very gracious in providing information and feedback whenever somebody asks for it. So, yeah, I have respect for that. Lots of
Excellent.
respect for
Excellent.
Mr. Chappelle,
Excellent.
and I
Excellent.
hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. Don't come at me,
Uh,
Doc.
sounds good. Sounds good. All
Yeah.
right. Well, is there before we close it out? Is there anything else that wanted to touch on or bring up or
Well, I
uh,
just
say before we go?
yeah, I'd honestly like to thank you, Reggie, for having me on and for doing this. It's an ambitious project, and I know you're a busy guy, so this is kind of something you're trying to fit in where you can. But it's nice. It's nice to have something that's moreover Kempo specific, and there are other like YouTube channels and stuff, and after a while they tend to branch off into a bunch of other things. I'm not going to name any names, but I really appreciate you just getting this started and the opportunity to come on and talk with you. And I know you're going to do your bonus episodes for any branch off type of things, but I think that's great too. So that gives you the opportunity to keep a core type of a Kempo theme, but also do something different. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what we do in Kempo anyway, right? We always
Yeah.
want to do
Yeah.
something a little
Exactly.
different and try
Exactly.
it out. So congrats to you for starting this, and keep going, brother.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on with me. I enjoy our chat here, and look
Likewise.
forward to future stories and future good things. And we'll just keep the fires going, and keep on training, and keep on doing what we love so much. So thank you again. You have a great day, great evening, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks again, Reggie.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye bye.